Hi there, and welcome to Off the Data Provided, an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we're just going to focus on a recent article from the Times of India entitled The Quiet Grief of Adult Friendship. Throughout our exploration of the article, we will address some of the main points as well as offer some suggestions and some feedback regarding how you can foster and better yet maintain adult friendships. Additionally, we will have an Ask Dr. Shepard at the end of the episode. If you would like to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So, delving into the Times of India article, The Quiet Grief of Adult Friendship, I saw this article on my Twitter newsfeed, reposted and engaged with several times. So I thought that it was interesting to see that people were talking about the struggles of fostering as well as maintaining adult friendships. Amongst this discussion, I also saw kind of a tweet talking about how do you move from friend to close friend. And so I thought seeing this small discourse around friendship was a really good thing to discuss this week. As you are aware, I am an expert in communication, and one of my focuses is on friendship. I think friendship is the most fascinating interpersonal relationship that we have, as we have discussed before on this podcast, primarily because there are no institutions or formal rules that govern how a friendship should operate, how it should be maintained, how it should be terminated. Therefore, it's somewhat of the wild, wild west when it comes to friendships. And for me, as a scholar of communication, I think that makes it even more fascinating because what rules do we make up? What things do we put into place to make sure that we hopefully maintain these relationships if we so want to? So this article, right, The Quiet Grief of Adult Friendship, talks about how hard it is to maintain friendships, how we lose our friendships along the way. The article talks about this invisible funeral where heartbreaks have infrastructure. There are films about it. There are songs about it. There are books about it. There's poetry about it. There are entire industries dedicated to helping people work through romantic loss, where friendship grief is invisible at times. Nobody formally teaches you how painful it can be or how slow it can be to recover from that, how sometimes we feel as if it's a slow death with a friendship where you slowly lose access to someone who is maybe part of your inner circle or life. And so what I find very fascinating about all of this, especially as someone whose focus is on friendship, is I am someone who talks about this a lot, who focuses a lot of class time and materials on friendship, in part because it's often made invisible. So people talk about couples therapy. Well, people usually go to couples therapy because of romantic relationships. If you said you wanted to go to couples therapy to work through a rough patch with your friend, most people would look at you sideways. They would look at you a little confused because why do you need to go to a third party to work out a grievance with a friend? And on the flip side, right, if you had an issue with a family member, we'd know that people go to therapy to talk with their parents, talk with children, to talk with their partners. So we know that clearly we have systems, we have institutions that exist that could help friendships, yet we are very wary of using them or to explicitly engage with friendships in that manner. And I think that is something that has unfortunately harmed a lot of people. What happens usually with friendships, as we have talked about before, is usually they slowly but surely dissipate. And what I have coined a term, amienship, all the way back in 2018. So we are looking at 8 years, I would say round up a decade, because I've been thinking about that term well before that. And essentially just a reminder for our listeners, maybe you're a new listener or someone that has forgotten. But when it comes to amienships are relationships that were once built and maintained through investment, but are now maintained through following and limitedly interacting with one another, oftentimes through social media platforms. And so the article references this somewhat, talking about the sanitized versions of ourselves, how a lot of times we are following our friends. We know their favorite spots to eat. We know what movies they've gone to see. We know major life updates that have happened, whether it's jobs, whether it's their health, whether it is moving somewhere, because these are things that we oftentimes post on social media. But we're more so, as I have said, become voyeurs of these individuals. And social media and smartphones have truly optimized our usage of voyeurism for these friends. And as I have always held, the friendship formula, we've talked about it multiple times here on the podcast, but just also a brief reminder, the friendship formula is a formula that comprises of 4 main elements. And these elements, I believe, are vital for any friendship, really any interpersonal relationship, but especially friendship. The first and foremost important aspect is investment. And so investment is our time, our energy, our thoughts, and our feelings. It's what we put into a relationship. Through that investment, hopefully you build the other 3 formula ingredients, which are emotional closeness, trust, and support. So support is, of course, verbal and nonverbal. So verbal support is showcased through dialogue, where nonverbal support is displayed through action. So I can support you by showing up to something that you're doing, or I can support you by buying something that you're selling. I can also support you verbally through encouragement. We also have trust, another ingredient. So this is not betraying someone's confidence and doing what you say you will do. So if we make plans to go to brunch at 2 p.m. on Sunday, then I'm supposed to show up at 2 p.m. on Sunday. You trust my word. My word is my bond. Also, if you tell me something in confidence, I don't tell everyone else. I'm not gossiping about it. And then, of course, emotional closeness is through dialogue/self-disclosure. So where you reveal things about yourself that people wouldn't knowingly know, as well as through doing things together, that shared activity. So when we think about all these ingredients, investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support, and how the lack of investment leads to then a lack of emotional closeness, a lack of maybe support, a lack of potentially trust, this leads us to the space where amienships have really flourished, where modern adulthood kind of has encouraged us to view what our friends are doing, but not necessarily interact and invest. We've been taught with capitalistic language that our investment should have an ROI, right? An ROI is return on investment. So you want to quote unquote hedge your bets. You're maybe not going to view someone as a beneficial friendship if you're always giving, and they're always taking, and vice versa. But as the article kind of concludes with saying that despite impossible schedules and emotional fatigues, some friends continue returning. They send memes during meetings. They remember your important dates. They call you out of the blue, not because it's convenient, but because somewhere beneath all the exhaustion adulthood imposes, they still consider your inner life important. Sometimes it is simply the stubborn decision to keep returning to people despite the world's constant training you to prioritize everything else. And so what this relates to is the fact that some people are looking past the language of ROI, and they're continuing to invest and put themselves out there for people who maybe aren't always reaching out. So we know that friendship, as the article also highlights, quote unquote, friendship, however, has always depended on certain irrational generosity, a willingness to waste time together magnificently, to listen to the same anxiety for the fifth time, to sit through silence, to remain available without agenda. But what does that look like when we are in a society where we are trying to optimize our time? When we're oftentimes doing these cost benefit analyses with, well, who initiated the plan last time? Who texted? Did I double text? Does this person drain my energy? Is it worth me continuing to make an effort? Am I really going to drive 45 minutes to attend this thing that I really don't want to just to support this person? Maybe I should send a quick check-in text. Hey, are we still on for today, even though we made these plans 2 weeks ago? I know life changes, so let me check in. All of this baggage that we have on top of friendships that, quite frankly, didn't exist to the extent even a generation ago. So I always talk about with my students, especially with the concept of omnientship and why it is so prevalent in people's lives, where they don't even have close friends, I would argue, are not necessarily even friends, but more so omniens, is because they are inundated with so much going on. And we know from decades worth of research on friendship that when life gets difficult, when things get very tough for someone, that friends are oftentimes the people that we neglect the first, right? You're not going to neglect your family. You're not going to neglect your romantic relationships, not going to neglect work, especially in this economy, right? But our friends, we assume they they understand. I can keep putting them on the back burner. But the issue is when we keep putting people on the back burner, then sometimes those relationships just gradually, slowly, but surely dissipate. So I know for several close friends that I've lost over the past few years, it became something where I was put somewhat on the back burner. And I understood that things were difficult for said friend and assumed that they would reach out when things got easier, but then they didn't reach out. Or when they did reach out, so much time had passed that I wasn't necessarily interested or willing to do the level of investment that it would take to bring our friendship back to being close. So I know one friend who lives here in Philadelphia, and we kind of lost touch because he prioritized his romantic relationship. And I understood that, of course, you won't have as much time for me. I've said this before on the podcast, but it doesn't go from 60 to 0. There has to be an in-between or sweet spot. And anytime I'm making adult friends, I always let them know that that's a non-negotiable for me, that I'm not just a place filler or holder until you find your quote-unquote partner. And then, oh, you have your partner, you don't have any time for me. If that's how you view life or that's how you do friendships, we're just not compatible for adult friendships, and that's okay. We're just not meant to be adult friends. But if you are someone that does that and is aware of that, then you can't necessarily be shocked. And so my friend was a bit shocked, and I shared with my friend that, hey, I made you birthday cookies and you couldn't pick them up because you were out and about with your then boo. And I said, cool, fine. I put them in the freezer. They were fine. But then months went by. I didn't hear really anything from you. I'd reach out and you say, oh yeah, I'll get them. And nothing happened. And so I wasn't going to sit around, right, as we said, and do the irrational, right, generosity of continuing to reach out and reach out and reach out. Eventually, someone gets tired of that if I'm always the one planning. Now, as I've shared before, I have a more non-traditional life being a professor where I work in person, usually 2 days, sometimes 3 days a week. And then the other days I'm not in person, but I'm able to work from home or work elsewhere. So I know that my schedule is more flexible. Another friend that I had lost through the adulthood woes lived in New York City, and one of his things was, your schedule is freer than mine. I can't always come to see you. And I said, have I ever made that an issue that I'm always coming to New York? And he said, no. I said, exactly. I'm aware that my schedule is freer than yours, and so it's easier to fit around your schedule. But you are never the one that sends the text to say, hey, I'd love to hang out with you. It's always on me. The ownership is always on me. I understand that relationships are usually never 50-50, or if they are 50-50, it oftentimes oscillates. So sometimes it's 80-20 on someone's part, but you would hope then it oscillates back, not just stays on 80-20. And so for that friend, I shared that, hey, if we're going to be friends again, If we're going to really invest and become close friends and do that level of investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not willing to go 50-50 with you at the beginning. I want to see that you have some skin and teeth in the game. I said, to be honest with you, it's going to be something like 70-30, maybe 60-40. I will initiate at times, but I'm going to be looking for you to initiate more. If the ball gets dropped in conversation, I'm going to look for you to pick it up because that's what I've done for almost a decade plus of our relationship. And I feel as if that was taken for granted. And I want someone that truly has some skin in the game with me. And my friend said, oh, of course, I'm going to do that. I love you. You're like a brother to me. Let's do it. And I said, no. Take some time. Take a week or so. Think about it. And then let's talk again. You reach out to me in a week. He never reached back out. And it's fine, right? I am someone who has very close adult friendships. Essentially consider a lot of them siblings. Two of my closest women best friends, I consider them sisters, right? One an older sister, one a younger sister, even though I'm only about a week older than her. But still, I am older. So I always joke with Kiera, right? Dr. Singleton, shout out to you. I always joke with her, respect your elders. She's always like, you're only like 6-7 days older. I said, but it's still older. And so I have very close relationships with everyone. Literally, Kiera called me, wow, recording this podcast, and we call each other out of the blue. We text each other. We prioritize. We make space and time for investment. And that is what people have to do. The article doesn't offer aspects of things that people should do to foster friendships, to foster adult friendships, to move from just friend to close friend. So that's what I'm going to spend the rest of this podcast doing before we get into the Ask Dr. Shepard. But it really does highlight how life can get out of control and how you can lose friendships. One thing that the article didn't mention that I also think is important to talk about, and we have talked about on this podcast before, is our usage of smartphones and how these smartphones have actually removed the intimacy from our even face-to-face conversations. I know that I'm not the only one guilty or have experienced it as well, where you're talking to someone and they're on their phone, or someone's trying to talk to you and you're on your phone. You're trying to quote unquote multitask. But in doing that, you're not as fully present as you could be. And as we've talked about before on this podcast, we actually know that the level of depth and intimacy that is shared is lesser when a phone is just out, not even on it. If a phone is visible, the level is less than if the phone was not visible. So the first thing I always recommend and suggest to my students, and as I suggested to you before, is if you are trying to build a friendship, if you are trying to maintain a friendship, if you're trying to foster, create a friendship, let's make sure those cell phones are away. They're on silent. They're not even on vibrate, just fully on silent, so you can be present with people. What we know from decades worth of interpersonal and psychology studies and sociology studies is that repetition creates familiarity. Proximity creates intimacy. So we know that clearly being in school, college, a workplace where you are in proximity with people, where you are forced to see them continually, helps you build those friendships. So encountering those same people builds closeness over time. So being a child, being someone, a young adult, if you're in college, it offers these things naturally. You're kind of put in a schedule where you are going to interact with the same people, your high school friends, your college friends. But when those institutions and those frequencies of repeated building of closeness, because you are seeing them with repetition and your proximity with them goes away, then what happens? And this is where a lot of people are finding themselves. It's where I've found myself with a lot of my close best friends, right? Friends with an S. All of my closest friends do not live by me, nor do they actually live close. The closest person that lives to me lives in DC, but that's still about a 2.5 hour Amtrak ride. That's not something that is sustainable to do daily. I guess maybe in theory one could if they had the money and the time. I could go to DC or my friend in DC could come up to me, but that's not how that works. Another one of my best friends lives in Memphis, another lives in Boston, another lives in LA, another lives in North Carolina. So some of them, right, of course, the ones that have the same time zone makes it a lot easier. As we've discussed before, my best friend, my primo, my cousin who lives in LA, it's a lot harder for us to talk because of the 3-hour time difference. So how do we maneuver that? How do we work with that? I'm super close with all of these people. When I had my milestone 30th birthday party, they all flew in from across the country and spent a whole long weekend with me. And I still am very close to all of the people at that dinner, minus one person. And how have I maintained this? First is prioritizing these relationships. You have to actually invest. And so sometimes investing is doing things you don't want to do. Unfortunately, our society has taught us this hyper capitalistic consumerist society, do what you want, do what you love. If you're not doing something you don't like, hopefully money is involved. Well, okay, money isn't involved, but building and maintaining a friendship is. So a perfect example I can use is when Kiera had a birthday. She loves nature. She loves hiking. She likes to be around nature, all of this stuff. It's not really my preference, but I hadn't seen her for a few months and we had talked and she wanted, me to come up to Boston because she comes down to my area a lot. And I said, you know what? Okay. Well, what are you thinking about for your birthday? I have a flight credit that's expiring. We can figure something out. She wanted to go up to the Berkshires, to hike, to do all these things, to go to a museum that was over there, do these things. Most of it isn't my cup of tea, but I love Kiera. That's my friend. That's my best friend. I'm going to do it. I'm investing. I'm investing my time, my energy, my money. I could be doing a whole host of other things, but I wanted to spend time with her. And when we were together, also, our phones were mostly away. We were present. Of course, we took some photos. And on her actual birth date, of course, her phone was out and she was busy on her phone responding to messages and phone calls and all of that. But we made time. We made sure we had time that it was just us. We had a lovely pizza dinner, I remember, that I enjoyed up there. It just was about setting aside the space. So first and foremost is that investment. It's the most important aspect of the friendship formula because if you're not investing, you're not going to have that emotional closeness, that trust and support. So clearly with this example, I was investing. I also was supporting her. Through that time, we also were building further our emotional closeness. We were creating shared experiences. Through that, we were having dialogue. We were talking about intimate things back at the house we were staying at. We were having deep discussions because we were in person. Now, granted, outside of this trip, I talked to Kiera several times a week. There was, of course, a portion of life where I talked to Kiera on the phone every single day, almost 365. But as we have matured in our adulthood, we know that that isn't necessarily sustainable. It doesn't mean that our friendship isn't as close. I would say we're even closer. Some of the stuff that we talk about now is things we wouldn't talk about even 5 years ago. So we've gotten closer, but our frequency maybe isn't as frequent. And that's the same thing with my best friend Darius, who lives in DC, where we used to talk almost every single day. I would joke with people that he was my unofficial coworker because when I was walking to class, I would call him because he at the time was working from home. Or when I was between classes, if I had a long break, I would call him and we would chat, or I would call him when I was leaving, and sometimes he would randomly call me. So he felt as if he was my coworker because I was talking to him a lot throughout the workday. Now, again, that goes to my non-traditional schedule and his non-traditional work at the time, being able to work from home. And sometimes he would have to take a call on his work line and I would just stay on hold, or he would call me back if it was a long call or vice versa. So first is investing. You have to explicitly make the time. So whether that's cold calling people, whether that is having plan scheduled events. I know here in Philadelphia, I love to go to the movies. And so my friends that live here in Philadelphia, if I'm going to a movie and I know it's during traditional time, so AKA the weekend or an evening showing, I'll invite them because I know they have traditional jobs. If it's during the afternoon, when I actually prefer to go because nobody's there, I usually don't invite them, but that's something that people are aware of. One of my friends, Humphrey, just got the A-list, and when I told him it's great, where you're now in my entourage, I'm in yours. If I go to a movie, I'm just going to add you if it's during one of the non-traditional times because he works a more traditional 9 to 5 job. So if it's outside of those times, I'll just add you. And if it's something you can't go to, then cancel it. But if it is something you can go to, then just come. And even though we're in the theater, we're probably mostly silent, though I'm sure there'll be a little banter if there's a funny moment or a really scary moment or a moment we did like or didn't like. Outside of that, sure. Then we have a conversation outside the movie for maybe 10, 15 minutes. But hey, that was FaceTime that we wouldn't have had if I didn't invite you. So it's being intentional. It's making sure we are putting ourselves out there and also realizing that sometimes you're just the planner. So I've realized in the majority of my friendships, I am the planner. I like to plan things. So I have no issue reaching out to people to plan things, to figure things out. My issue with when it comes to friendships and planning more so is if the onus is always on me. So I know that I'm a planner, but the friends that I have in Philadelphia, they also plan things from time to time. It's not as frequent as I do, which is fine because they do have more traditional lives. So I have more space and time to do that, but they put in the effort and or when I'm planning things, they show up. Or if they can't show up, they let me know. And vice versa. I have a friend that is having an event this weekend that I can't go to, so I let them know. It just wasn't I got the invite and I just didn't say anything, so you should know I'm not going. No, part of it is still showing up, still responding, still engaging. And so, of course, with social media, it can make it easier or it can make it harder. So I know with social media, some of my close friends, I DM them things all the time. They DM me things all the time. And so sometimes it's about, okay, if I see something really, really funny, I'll probably actually text it to you and then I'll call you because I want to talk about it. So figuring out ways to do that, as well as I know people don't watch things as linear anymore. So there used to be a time and a day where we would live tweet scandal, how to go with murder. People were live watching these things. Maybe you would host nights to see things. I know I used to host award show nights where I'd have friends over to watch award shows. I'm slowly but surely becoming less and less invested in that. So I'm not hosting them really anymore. But any excuse just to get people together. I know for me, usually the holidays is a really easy chance that, okay, people are about to be out of town or they have off. Let's plan something. So I usually always host something around Christmas Eve if people are in town or just in the wintertime. And then, of course, the summer, people usually have more flexibility. So host a barbecue. So worst case, let's say I do nothing else. I know that I see my friends twice a year that live in my city. Now, for the people that don't live in my city, it's more of an effort, but you have to plan those things. And so for my best friend that lives in Memphis, one thing that we do is usually one year I go and fly to her, the other year she'll fly to me, vice versa. Sometimes the same year we'll see each other twice. I'll fly to her, she'll fly to me, but it's being intentional. And we had that friendship discussion, and we'll talk about that afterwards. Something that I think is important for adults to do is really these friendship check-ins. And so Dr. Anderson, Janine, and I are famous for this, and something I push on anybody to have these checks with your friends once a year or once every few years, because we change, and what our desires are, what our needs are, what our norms, what our values are might be changing, and that might also impact our relationship. So I remember one of our check-ins a few years ago, and Janine asked me, is there something I can do that I'm not doing? I said, I'd love to see you more. I understand with adulthood, it's difficult. You're flying a lot for your job. But if you are going to be somewhere close to me for a conference, give me advance notice. Maybe I can come down for a day if it's in DC or Baltimore or New York. Or on the flip side, if you're flying somewhere really fun that is during a time where I'm not in the semester, let me know. And maybe we can just make a friend trip out of it. And so we've done that. That little reoriented conversation has allowed us to see each other more. The issue ultimately with adult friendships is that we take them for granted. We take these individuals for granted that we have fostered these close relationships with from high school, from college, from grad school, from maybe a place that you worked at, and we aren't continually investing in them. Now, the investments don't have to be as frequent as they once were, but they still should be investments. So, a perfect example is one of my good friends from grad school, somewhat of a mentor, Jummy, came to Philadelphia and we hadn't talked maybe for a year. And she hit me, "Hey, just landed in Philly. So sorry for the short notice. I'd love to see you. I'm in town for a few days. Here's what it is." Great, you made the effort. I'm going to make the effort to see you as well. And what ultimately ended up happening is I met her for breakfast before I went to the gym. I woke up a little earlier than I would have wanted to, right? I made that effort, the investment, the intention. But on the flip side, I got to see someone who I hadn't seen in a few years, who was super close to me during a very hard time in grad school, and is someone who I still feel close to. I was invited to her wedding. Unfortunately, I couldn't go because of work. So even though I have not just a schedule, right, I still do work. So it's always about that, right? First, you need to initiate. You need to invest. You need to work on that emotional closeness through shared activities, through dialogues. Of course, geographic distance is something that makes friendships hard, especially in adulthood, but figuring that out. So for my friend who lives in North Carolina, even though it's the same time zone, he's really busy. We usually talk every few months. My friend in LA, we usually talk every few months. But when we do talk, it's not a quick talk. We know that when we catch up, it's going to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Literally, my most recent conversation with Maya Primo, he called me while he was driving somewhere in California. And it was a long drive, and we talked for the entirety of the drive. It's just about reaching out to people. Sometimes I even call up friends when I'm just running errands. Okay, maybe I won't listen to music, but I can talk to them or catch up. Sometimes they pick up, sometimes they don't. Sometimes those texts like, "Are you good?" I'm like, "Oh, just running errands. I figured we hadn't talked in a bit. Was trying to see if we could talk." Sometimes they call me back. Sometimes like, "Oh no, I'm not free right now, but maybe this weekend." And so what I do, what's important, and what I've realized a lot of people are guilty of doing is they kind of half make plans. Be like, "Oh, let's hang out next week." Sure, sounds good. Whoa, when next week? What are we doing? So when that opportunity arises, how about this weekend we'll talk? I say, okay, great. How's Saturday at 2 p.m.? Okay, and then that gives them a definitive, oh, that's not going to work for me. And then they usually will counter with a time that works. And then I'll counter if it doesn't work. And then we figure it out. So don't leave stuff hanging on the table. Initiate and be concrete with it. Don't be so vague or wishy-washy. "Oh, I miss you. We should hang out. Oh, I'd love to talk to you." When people send those messages to me, there was a time and a place where I would engage and try and nail down concretely. But on the flip side, where I am now in life, because I have nurtured such amazing and close interpersonal relationships and friendships with these people, when someone oftentimes does that who's outside of my main circle of close friends, I kind of put the ball back in their court, be like, "Oh, I've missed you too. When are you thinking?" Or, "Yeah, we should do that. I'm free after this date. What are you thinking?" And 9.9 times out of 10, not saying it hasn't happened, but 9.9 times out of 10, they just drop the ball. They're looking for you to acknowledge that you also miss them. And sometimes that's all it is. And that's okay. On another side, sometimes they want you to do the heavy lifting, saying, "Hey, I initiated. I told you I missed you. We should talk. So now I want you to figure it out." Oh, well, if I really missed you and wanted to talk to you, I would figure it out. That's my feeling. But again, it goes back to the article that we talked about. Friendships have been built on generosity. And sometimes you have to hold the bag a lot more than the other person is. And that is up to you to figure out what works. As I've always said, communication is always context, content, and communicator specific. So for me, someone that has a lot of close friends already and can rely on these people, as I've shared before, when There was a family emergency in my life that happened a few years ago. Several of my friends were willing and able to drop at a moment's notice and do what I would if anything I needed. And they know in turn that I'd be willing and able to do that as well. We've built that bond and have maintained that bond. So for me, when we think about context, content, and communicator specific, if someone who's not in my internal circle reaches out and say they've missed me, I can say, "Oh, that's nice to hear. Like, how have you been doing?" But I haven't really missed you because if I really did miss you, I probably would have reached out to make some type of plans to talk at the very least, or if not, to hang. So for me, as someone who is satisfied with adult friendships and realize that we only have 24 hours in a day, I can't be super close with everybody because I just don't have the time that requires. I'm not going to be as invested. But if you're someone that doesn't have a lot of close friends, if you're someone that is desiring or yearning to have closer friends, then you need to get your skin in the game a little bit. And if you reach out to someone and say that you miss them, well, then follow up and get concrete plans. Or if someone reaches out to you and says that they miss you and you're someone that's desiring, then you reach out and create those concrete plans. That's going to be really helpful for what you are going through. So we know, as I have highlighted, right, we need that investment. We need that emotional closeness. We need that trust. We need that support. We know that friendships can fade if you aren't investing in them. If you're not showing up, if you're not having that friendship check-in conversation about, okay, we met in grad school, we were super close. Now I'm moving to a new place. You're moving to a new place. How are we going to work this through? What is our game plan? Maybe it's just making sure every third Saturday of the month we have a long 2-hour catch up about what's going on. Because, as we've said before, deterioration really stems from getting pulled in a lot of different directions, a lack of support. We know we've heard that we have friends for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. I've stressed that before on this podcast. And I think sometimes an issue is you have to realize not every friendship is going to be a lifetime friendship, but you can have long seasonal friendships. You can also have reasonable friendships. But what is happening is a lot of people don't have lifetime friendships. They don't have these long-term friendships. They kind of have these friendships because, oh, we went to college or we worked at this place, but now you don't work at that place anymore. Now you're not in that school. You're not actively involved. You don't live close to that school. You don't live close to each other. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to maintain this? That is where you need to have that friendship check-in before these changes happen. So we know that friends for a reason or season, usually we call those friends of the road. So they change as we move along. Where friends for a lifetime are friends of the heart. They remain close to us regardless of physical distance between us. So we want to make sure that we are aware of where do these people fall? And maybe they're a season friend, but you want them as a lifetime friend. So, okay, how can I make that happen? That friendship check-in is going to be important. That routine, that getting it on the calendar. I know for some relationships that want to come back in my life, to me, we schedule calls because we're not that close where I'm going to pick up the phone necessarily if I see your name, especially if I'm doing something. You're not on that access list. That just is what it is. Let's be fully transparent. So let's schedule times to talk. Now, eventually, through those scheduled times, maybe the emotional intimacy, that emotional closeness gets stronger. I trust you more. I feel as if you're supporting me more. So I'm going to pick up that random phone call, or I do feel fine or safe to randomly call you, as Kiara really did while I'm doing the podcast, right? Just a random cold call. I get random cold calls from Kiara, from Darius, from Janine all the time, even from Jaime, right? My primo, who I love. They happen just randomly because that is the relationship we have. And so if they call me randomly and I'm free, I pick up. Even if they call me randomly and I'm not necessarily free, sometimes I pause what I'm doing if it is something that I can pause. Clearly, if you call me while I'm teaching, it's no, I'm not picking up. But if you call me and I'm watching TV, sure. If you call me and maybe I'm chilling on the couch with somebody, I might pick up and say, hey, I'm hanging out with someone. Is everything okay? 9 times out of 10, it's fine. And I just call them when I'm done hanging out with my friend or doing whatever I'm doing. But sometimes it's not. But we've built that emotional closeness. So we know for all intents and purposes that first and foremost, it starts with your intention. What is your intention with these relationships? Do you want to build? Do you want to maintain? Do you want to get closer? Do you want to end the friendship? Then it's about your investment level. How can we increase it? How can we maintain it? Through that investment, you'll build that emotional closeness, that trust and support. And as I have said and will hold, keep having those friendship check ins. Dr. Anderson and I, Janine, we do them once every 2 years or so now, but also we are close enough where if there is something that she's done or isn't doing that's bothering me, I feel no issue addressing her immediately about it, sending her a text or giving her a cold call, vice versa. Sometimes she calls me, hey, I haven't heard your voice in a little while. I just wanted to call. And you think those calls would be short, but of course they're not because I'm a talker and she's a talker. And so we talk for about an hour or so. And then she's like, oh, wow, that was a lot. I can't do this all the time. I'm like, no, I get it. Like, you're very busy. I get what's going on. But then, of course, somehow we do it again the next week or in 2 weeks. So once you start encompassing and building these people into your life and your schedule, it becomes a lot easier. So schedule it at first, and then it will become natural. But also, especially for those more long distance friends, I would argue you need to physically see each other if possible, hopefully once every 18 to 24 months. And make sure that it's just not a one-day thing, right? So even Zamir, who lives in North Carolina, usually we see each other every 18 to 24 months, and it'll be a whole week or weekend. And so that is how we are building and maintaining our relationship. Where sure, I'm not on his frequent call list, nor is he on mine, but we maintain our close relationship through these week or long weekends that we do once every year and a half to 2 years. And we're due for one soon. And I know that he'll be coming, whether this fall or even this summer, right? He and I both love cold weather, so maybe it's the fall. But it's about doing these things. And when you do them, they become routine, right? We know that it takes 30 days to create a routine. So clearly, maybe you're not calling this friend every 30 days, but maybe after 6 months of having this routine of talking every 2 weeks, it becomes more natural and they become someone you want to share funny memes with. I think the digital sphere can be a great place to pull from to build and maintain these relationships, but you really have to invest that effort and energy. So those are my thoughts and feelings from the article. I highly recommend that you read it. I have linked it in the episode overview so you can read it for yourself and see if the deterioration of adult friendships and how difficult it is speaks to you. And hopefully some of the tips and tricks that I gave you can help you if you are struggling with something like that. So now we are moving into the Ask Dr. Shepard for this week. As I have always said, if you have one, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So today's Ask Dr. Shepard is from a former student of mine who is struggling with maintaining friendships. I saved this one and it worked. Is struggling maintaining friendships with classmates after the course is over, and they were asking for my advice. I'm not going to break down everything, but in essence, they've made some friendships. It's been a whole semester has now passed, right? They made friendships in a fall semester. They weren't necessarily in classes with these individuals in the spring. It became more difficult. Now summer is here and they're worried about how they're going to maintain or build or keep these relationships. So for John, I will call him, I would suggest first and foremost reaching out and setting up a time to talk. And talk to this person. Ideally, it's in person if you can, because you are former classmates. So they live in the Philly area, but as we have discussed, sometimes life can be really hectic. It could be a FaceTime or a video call or even a phone call, and share with the person that you enjoy their friendship. You want to maintain the friendship. You realize that adulthood can get out of hand at times and friendships can be put on the back burner, but you don't want to allow that to be an excuse to lose this connection that you value. I think anybody hearing that from someone hopefully would feel compassion and also feel a bit of pride that someone wants to be their friend and wants to put in effort to maintain the friendship. So hopefully that's how the person feels. And then you can have a dialogue about, well, how can you maintain this friendship? Is it maybe seeing each other more frequently, planning something? Maybe you, as I shared before with Humphrey, right? We're both now A-listers. I know I'll see Humphrey at least once a month now because I'm going to add him to movies that I go to. And I'm betting out of the 3 or 4 I add him to, he'll make it to at least one, if not more. So now I know I have a built-in thing with my friend Humphrey where I will see him at least once a month now, where there've gone some months where I haven't seen him just because life is crazy. Even though I have a non-traditional schedule, life is still crazy for me. And he has a more traditional schedule, but life is still crazy for him. But now we have this thing where, okay, when I go to the movies, I know that it might be a time I see Humphrey. Great. So figure that out with your friend. Is it you both like certain sports? Is it music? Is it art? Is it anime? Is it TV shows? What is it that you all like together, and how can we incorporate in doing that together physically? Ideally, because they live in the same area. So it's about having that first conversation, scheduling a time to hang out. And then once you're done hanging out, in the midst of that, schedule the next one. So I know for when I've been trying to build relationships, especially as someone who has moved a lot, who has made friends in a whole lot of different areas, it's great to be in the moment and we're having fun. Okay, I'd love to do this again. What's your schedule look like? And let's get the concrete plan there while we're in the midst of enjoying and having fun. Because it's a whole lot harder, as my dad has always said, to say no to someone in person. So whenever my dad brings that up in terms of when you're having an issue with whether it's customer service or whatever, right? Of course, doing the email or the chat bot, that's the easy thing to do, but it's easy to say no. But over the phone, it's a little harder, and especially in person, it's even harder. So if I want to hang out with you and we're having a great time and you're having a great time, I'm like, oh, wish we could keep doing this, but I know life is crazy. You got to do something later. In 2 weeks, let's do this. Does that work? Sure. All right. I'm going to put it in my calendar. Let's use the technology in our favor. I'm going to add you. So now it's in the person's calendar. It's going to send them a reminder. And then, of course, Humphrey and I have had this discussion before, the check-in. If I've made plans with you, do I need to check in with you the day before, the day of? Some people say yes. Some people say no. At the beginning of this relationship, just check in. It's no harmful. Hey, I'm so looking forward to tomorrow. We're still on. Da, da, da. It allows the person, if something came up, to say no. If something hasn't come up, to reaffirm. And if you're leaning with, I'm so excited, maybe they're a little tired, but there's, what, this person's excited. We had a great time last time. I'm going to rally and do that. What happens often with adult friendships, we didn't discuss it a lot in my overview of the article, is that people are tired. People are getting pulled in a million and one directions. The weekends used to be the time to hang out with friends, but because of how life is set up right now, oftentimes that's rest and recovery for people. So they're not even hanging out. But if I can preemptively say, hey, I'd love to see you. We had a great time. Okay, let's rally. Or on the flip side, we're adults. We're friendships. Okay, maybe it's rest and recovery or errands. Can't we run errands together? I just want to hang out with you. Or it's rest and recovery. Okay, come to my house. We'll do face masks. We'll order food. We'll just relax. Figure out ways to do things together, even the mundane together. You can make it exciting. As I shared before, when I'm running errands, I call Darius usually, or Darius will call me when he's running errands. And literally for part of the conversation, right, I'm on hold or I'm listening to him order something, or I'm listening to talk to a sales associate or vice versa. That's just part of it. Literally, when I got my pedicure last week, I called up Darius and we had a good hour conversation because I was there, right? I wasn't being rude I was trying not to be rude to the nail technician, but the nail technician was talking to the other tech, so I didn't feel as if I was. So that is what I suggest. Reach out, hopefully face-to-face, to talk about kind of the state. I'd love to see you again. If not, definitely a phone call. Don't do it through text. And then when you're hanging out, plan the next one while you're there and solidify that from there. That would be my suggestion for you, John. As always, if you want to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovider@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovider@gmail.com. And I will see you all on the next one. Goodbye.